When I served in Minnesota on the conference staff, one of the best assignments I ever got was to travel to the Philippines. So the Minnesota Conference has a conference-to-conference relationship with the United Church of Christ in Philippines in the southeast jurisdiction of Mindanao. And Mindanao is one of those places that is always on the U.S. State Department red list because it is a place where there is almost always relatively significant civil unrest. And in that country, which is overwhelmingly Catholic, the United Church is this small but scrappy Protestant denomination. Sounds familiar. And one of the things that the pastors in that region have done is serve as human rights monitors for human rights violations. And this has meant sometimes tragedy. So for a group of us, ministers, church members, seminary students, to go to the Philippines was not a vacation. It was a study trip. But we did go in January. And going from Minnesota in January, the coldest, darkest, iciest time of year, to what is literally a tropical paradise was no hardship at all. And we saw amazing things. We ate remarkable food, and we met life-changing people, some of the most inspiring leaders of faith that I have ever met. And it gave me a moment in the history of my life, of me getting to be me. It gave me a moment where I felt that I lived out my value of loving and serving a global community. And you have heard me speak about this experience in other sermons. A story here, a fragment there. And you know, I think, the thing that was the most astounding. We were never treated like visitors or tourists. We were welcomed as long-lost cousins from another part of the global family of faith. And in the most gentle way possible, we were informed about the way our country treats their country. The Philippines is a place where the United States have maintained military presence for decades, causing significant issues for many of the people who live there. It's a country whose major export is labor and talent. Their people come to our country to do many things, especially nursing, because that's a highly valued and respected form of service in that culture. So what do you learn about hope when you leave your chilly bubble of privilege in one of the most stable and affluent places in the world, and you are welcomed into a culture of people who have lived under generations of colonial rule and who still encounter regular military presence in daily lives? Well, you learn that hope is the healthiest form, maybe the most faithful form of waiting. So here we are in Advent, the first Sunday, a Sunday to celebrate hope, for we are at the first step of a journey toward Christmas, entering into a period of waiting and reflection. For Advent is a season of preparation, the mini Lent to Christmas as Lent is to Easter. But, I mean, why would we need this? You know, I'm hearing from people that they're putting their Christmas decorations up, I mean, some of them right after Halloween. Why do we need preparation? Because Christmas is like a happy thing. Why do we need to prepare for something happy like Christmas? Maybe we I don't know, maybe we don't need Advent this year. Maybe we just need a little Christmas right this very minute. But waiting is not necessarily something we get to choose to do or not do. It is part of human life, and for me, it is one of my least favorite parts. I'm not particularly good at it. I don't enjoy it. But waiting is not optional. It's what we do with the times of waiting. When we're holding our breath, that make a qualitative difference for our lives. There is a choice about how we wait. We can wait impatiently. We can curse the person in front of us who forgets to drive when the light is green. We can be frustrated with the person in front of us who bungles up their payment in the grocery store line. And we can be upset. We can definitely be upset about waiting for news about the status of coronavirus. We can be upset about waiting for the status of our election. We can be very upset that racial injustice continues to ravage our nation and undermine the finest aspirations of our communities. It is legit to be angry about having to wait for some things. It is normal to be anxious when we have to wait. But if you have the privilege to consider it in a different light, I invite you to do so. For we always have a choice to change our perspective, even when we cannot change our circumstances. And perhaps this is what Advent is inviting us to do in this awful year, 2020, this awful time of waiting. Corinne Carvalho is a professor at University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. And she says this about today's scripture passage from Isaiah. She writes, Isaiah 64 depicts God as the one who tears open the heavens and causes wildfire to sweep through brush. We have had enough of these images this past summer. The heavens opened over Houston, Florida, and the Caribbean, while fires raged from Oregon to Southern California. The terrifying powers of natural disasters have reminded us of the fragility of human life. Like the ancient poet, we affirm that we are not in control. Isaiah 64 arises from a very different historical context, however. The material in the final 11 chapters of the book seem to reflect challenges that the Israelites faced during the Persian period. Some Israelites, displaced by Babylonian aggression, had now returned to Jerusalem under Persian sponsorship. The Israelites who had not been displaced clashed with this immigrating group over questions of status, social standing, and ultimately political and religious authority. Contemporary readers of this material should understand it in the context of overriding colonial power. Persia remained the real arbiter of power. This local tension reflects the way that colonization reconfigures group identity, not just in relation to the external colonizing power, but in relation to each other. With the rebuilding of the temple, which families should serve as priests? Who has political authority? Did God reject the Davidic dynasty completely, or does the covenant with David remain in effect? Persian period texts reflect these tensions. And she concludes saying that this conflict is overtly addressed in Isaiah 63, just prior to this poetic exploration of the same. So what do we think of a hope that's asking for the heavens to be torn open? We know how terrible that can be. What do we think of a hope that yearns and burns for transformation? It's a kind of waiting that is very different than irritation or petulance. To choose to hope can mean different things for different people. But for some, it means fiercely investing one's energy into a today that makes a different tomorrow. When I think of my time in the Philippines, it was so clear that hope was not just a relaxed waiting. Hope was an active way of being in the world. Hope was embracing the blessing of today while looking for a tomorrow where the military of another nation would not hold such prestigious weight. It meant a day when police disappearances and police harassment of activisms was not such a pressing and realistic concern. It would mean a day when presidential elections were not popularity contests, a day when family politics would not merge and become synonymous with national politics. They had much to hope for. And there is much to hope for. There is much to work for if we have the privilege of choosing hope. The professor in charge of our trip was Elena Fernandez from United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities. I keep up with him on Facebook. If you want to read really great theological posts, look up Dr. Fernandez, Eliezer Fernandez. And I want to share a reflection he wrote with you today, where he blends together this idea that waiting can be transformed into something active when we choose to help instead of just mark time, with a story from his childhood in the Philippines. He says this: "As a young boy, I waited in wakefulness as I watched for the water from the main irrigation canal to flow to our rice field from nightfall till dawn during drought seasons. It was a long and agonizing wait, especially in company with hungry mosquitoes, and I was tempted to sleep in our rice field's small hut. But I had to stay awake or perform a rooster-like sleep. If our rice field was to have water, I had to make sure that no one would steal or divert the water to another field. Waiting and watching for the water to flow to our field was crucial. Rice was our life. Rice was our hope, as it was for others. It was worth waiting for. It was worth staying awake." Without hope, he says, we cannot truly wait. Only those who have learned to hope can truly wait. I'm not speaking of waiting in general, but of a waiting that is generated by hope, or a hope that waits, which is different from waiting casually, waiting in doubt, waiting in dread, and aimless, idle waiting. Those who wait in hope do more than simply expect something external to themselves to come. Those who wait in hope are already grasped by its power, even as they wait. The waiting that is evoked by hope is an active waiting. Waiting in hope does not kill time, but redeems the in-between time, or the time being, from being just another time. Waiting in hope redeems and gives significance to the time being. For those who wait in hope, this time being is not to be written off or grimly avoided, but embraced as an occasion for faithful living. This time being is our time, a precious and momentous time, a time to stay awake and stay alert, so that what we hold dear, dignity, freedom, public goods, and shared flourishing, will not be undermined by destructive forces. He concludes his thoughts this way: in this time being, we need to see with the eyes of hope, walk with the feet of love, and speak boldly with the tongue of justice, because we care for our common flourishing. And we must constantly remind ourselves how we are for each other, much more so as we are facing monstrous socio-political pandemic compounded by the threat of the coronavirus. And he ends here. Let's wait in hope. Let's stay awake. Those who wait in hope do more than simply expect something to come. Those who wait in hope are already grasped by its power, even as they wait. So says Dr. Fernandez. And I say, we may not be able to choose all of our situation. Perhaps we never should have been accustomed to having so much control over our situation. But we can, in this time of waiting, choose to be grasped by the power of what is coming and filled with a spirit of lively hope, alert, not lulled into complacency by the soporific drain of long days and short weeks. For the hope we seek must be an urgent desire for radical change, a burning hope, an activist hope that seeks transformation and does not fear the end of today, knowing that today is full of today's injustices, but grasped by the power of the hope of tomorrow, which we may yet influence. Actively hopeful, actively working to bring the tomorrow we need today, asking God to tear open the heavens and rain justice down upon us, changing our world and refreshing our minds and setting fresh hearts of fire within us. This is the hope that Advent brings. So stay awake, stay alert, and stay hopeful, my beloved friends. Amen.